Before we get into verse 9, I want to kind of get you thinking about something. It's something, I want you to think about the idea of being self-sufficient. The idea of being a self-sufficient person. Because I think, maybe in some ways, like that can be a positive thing, right? I mean, I think when we see people who are capable and able to do things, like that's typically a strength, right? That's typically a positive thing. And I will say, on some level, I think it can be. But what about in our relationship with God? How does that capableness, how do our abilities to do things, how do they affect how we relate to God? Because I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, like, I want to be a capable person. Like, I'm a very independent person. I do not like asking for help. Like, it feels good when I come up against a task, even if it's just really dumb and basic. It's like, you need a hole, I'll dig a hole. You need to fill a hole, I'll fill a hole. You need to move a rock, I'll move a rock. Like, I like that. Like, I like to be capable. And I just recently took over my parents' business that they started. I took over the Major's restaurants. And my dad did that for 23 years. And there is so much stuff that is perpetually ready to go wrong in that restaurant, in those restaurants. Like, there's equipment on the roof, there's equipment in the restaurants, there's people, there's systems, there's technology, there's the internet, there's power. I mean, something's always going wrong. And over the course of 20-some years, of course, my dad got very good at knowing how to hone in on a problem and fix it. Every little piece of equipment's got its quirk. And something that I've noticed, and it's become kind of a joke between our office gal, who's been the office gal the whole time. It's sort of like this running joke when something goes wrong. She'll say, hey, the ice cream machine's not working, or hey, the fryer's doing this. And so I'll go try to fix it. I'll get on my phone, and I'm trying to Google and YouTube everything and figure it out. And I might come back in a half an hour later, and she'll ask me, did you get it fixed? And I'm like, well, not yet, but I think I'm getting close. And then she says something that I just can't hear, which is, did you call your dad? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not calling my dad. Like, I mean, that just puts me, like, that just makes me, that like hurts my pride, that I got to call dad, to get some help here. But sometimes that's exactly what I need to do, because he could be like, oh yeah, you flip this button, shut that, and push this, and it works. But in my self-sufficiency, in my desire to be a capable person, I don't call dad. And I would put before you, as we enter into our text here, that we need to beware of our abilities and our self-sufficiencies and the things that we bring to the table, because they can become a huge problem in our relationship with God. And so Micah's going to shed some light on this. He's going to help us understand when this desire to be capable and self-sufficient becomes a problem. So in verse 9, so this verse actually kind of does belong with the previous 8 verses, but I'm really glad that I got this verse, because the contrast we're going to see here is so important. In verse 9, Micah says, your hand shall be lifted up over your adversaries. Okay, so he's talking to the nation of Israel, and he's telling them, your hand is going to be lifted up over your adversaries, and all your enemies shall be cut off. All right, that's a great message right there. Let's just stop there and go home, okay? But the thing is, so your hand will be lifted up. That is a sign of victory, right? Like, if your hand is lifted up, it doesn't matter if it's in the boxing ring or on the battlefield. Like, that's timeless, universal sign for you win, right? So God is telling his people that he is going to make them victorious over their enemies. He is going to deliver them. That's what he just got done telling them in the prior 8 verses. But the thing is, it's so important that they understand how. How will their hand be raised up in victory over their enemies? How will that happen? Who will do that? And he's just told them that he is going to do it. right? He said, I'm going to raise up a ruler from among you. He is going to deliver you. He is going to shepherd you. You see, it was so important that they understand that, because what Israel does so often, and we do so often, is we hear a little word from God, and we grab onto the good stuff, and then we're like, got it, we're going to be victorious. Let's go do it, right? That's what the nation of Israel does time and time again. And the point is here is that you are designed to need God. You're designed to need God. Like, there's no version of life or you where you are not created with a need for God. So you understand why I want you to begin to think through this idea of being self-sufficient, being capable. Because you, by design, need God. He's created you in a relationship with him where you're designed to need him. And so often the nation of Israel and God's people, they missed that. And they just went off and tried to do it on their own. And so they're living completely out of context, right? They grab a little piece of what God said. I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to give you victory over your enemies. And then they would ignore all of the rest of it, all the other stuff that went along with it, and they would go try to do it themselves. And so they're constantly living their lives out of context with what God had spoken to them. We are designed to need God. And honestly, the essence of sin is seeking autonomy from God, right? A lot of times we think of sin as like these little bad things that we do in the corner. But at the heart of what sin is, it is a turning away from God to ourselves, right? Because we're created to be in relationship with him. We are designed to need him. And so here's the thing. We need to let God do his part, right? We're created with a need for him. There's specific things that only God can do for us. There's specific things that we're supposed to go to and get from God. There's no amount of self-sufficiency or capability ever gets rid of that. You're designed for that. And so we need to let God do his part. Your hand will be lifted up over your adversaries and all your enemies shall be cut off, was a cause for faith in God. It wasn't a call to action. It wasn't a call to go do it yourself. It was God promising his people something that only he could do for them. And they were simply supposed to look to hope in, and to trust in that promise from God. And this seems really obvious to me when we say it, but how about this, guys? How about when God says that he's going to do something, how about we let him do it, right? Seems like a good idea to me. Like, if God says he's going to do something, like, maybe let him do it, and maybe don't try to do it yourself, right? But we and our self-sufficiency and our capableness are constantly trying to do for ourselves what only God can do for us. And it gets us into a lot of trouble. When you begin to try to do for yourself what God has declared only he can do for you, like, you're going to have problems, right? This is a silly little thing, but like when I first got married, you got to make all the stupid mistakes. Well, I'm a terrible gift giver anyway, but I think it was our first year of marriage, my wife was teaching, and I was working a construction job. And she would go to work and teach, but she had these black shoes that, for some stupid reason, I didn't like them. Like, I didn't like them. They were kind of old and wearing out, and I was just like, man, like you look really good, but those shoes, man, they got to go. And she was like, the shoes are fine. They're comfortable. I like them, whatever. So her birthday's coming up. I don't remember if it was birthday or Christmas, but an occasion to give a gift. Okay, so I get this great idea. I'm going to get her a really nice pair of black shoes that she can wear, when she goes to work. So I do. I go pick out shoes, expensive shoes, really nice shoes, wrap them up, give them to her. She opens them. It did not go the way I thought it was going to go. she was not happy, impressed. In fact, she was like irritated by the gift, right? It's like she had declared, I don't need you to get me shoes, and I wasn't hearing it, right? She declared, I'm the one, that can take care of my wardrobe. I don't need your help, all right? Okay, well, there's things that God has said he doesn't need your help with, all right? And here's the thing. The nation of Israel they're not just trying to buy God's shoes. They're trying to wear God's shoes, right? Like that's what the rest of this passage is. It's Israel not just trying to buy shoes for God. It's Israel trying to wear God's shoes and be God and accomplish the things that God himself and God alone said he was going to do for them as a nation. So here, notice the transition from verse 9 to verse 10. So verse 9, he says, your hand will be lifted up over your adversaries and all your enemies will be cut off. Verse 10, I will cut off your horses and I will destroy your chariots. What? Like that, if that's not a major deviation from verse 9 to verse 10, then I don't know what is, right? Because God's saying, I'm coming, I'm going to save you, I'm going to cut off your enemies. And what's the first thing he cuts off? He cuts off your greatest strengths, the things that you think you bring to the table, right? He cuts off your horses and your chariots. See, your greatest strengths do not replace your need for God. Your greatest strengths, your greatest abilities, the things you're the best at, the things that you're most capable of, they don't replace the fact that you need God. Remember, he has designed you to need him. You need to let him be the things that he has said only he can be. And sometimes, we have to admit this, that our strength is probably more likely to hinder us in our relationship with God than it is to help us. The things that we're good at are probably, I would say this experientially, I would say this through the course of Scripture, like your strength is probably more likely to hinder you than to help you when it comes to your relationship with God. See, the thing is about horses and chariots in the Old Testament, over and over again, they're a thing, right? Because the strength and the size of your army mattered, obviously, for obvious reasons. So God many times specifically tells his people, do not amass for yourself a bunch of horses. Don't go buy a bunch of horses and get a bunch of chariots. Don't build a massive army and count it and be so happy and confident with how big and strong your army is. Why would God tell him not to do those things? Don't do that. Why? Because that's not how the victory gets won. Because if you do that, you're going to trust in these things, and you're not going to trust in my promise. You're not going to trust in my character. You're not going to trust in who I am and what I say and what I will do. You're going to trust in what you think you can do. Right? And so when God's coming to save, but it doesn't mean what you think it means all the time. Right? He's going to raise your hand in victory, but he might be coming for your horses and your chariots. He might be coming for your greatest strengths because you've gotten to a place where you think that that's where it's at. It's in me. It's in what I'm able to do. Isaiah, who is speaking to the same people in the same time period, he writes in Isaiah 31, he says, woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses, who trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or consult the Lord. Again, our greatest strengths, what are you good at? Don't let that thing convince you, deceive you into thinking that you don't desperately need God. There's things that only he can do, and you need to let him do those things. Because he goes on here in verse 11, and he says, I will cut off the cities of your land, and I will throw down all your strongholds. Your greatest strengths don't replace your need for God. Guess what? Your best things, they don't replace your need for God either. The best things that you have don't replace your need for God. You see, here's the thing. Cities, strongholds, they weren't bad. in and of themselves. Horses and chariots weren't bad. It's not like those things were evil, right? Like, that's not what God is saying here. His concern is when you begin to trust them. You begin to go after them the way that you're supposed to trust and go after God. You begin to believe that it's my strengths and my best stuff. Like, that is where salvation is. I have the ability to do these things. And the truth is, we don't. Because we're designed to need God. We're designed to be in relationship with him. And so they had let good things become bad things. Right? That's this first little section. They're all good things. They're all things that, honestly, they could have had. But the problem is, it's the place they had in their hearts. That's the concern, and that's why they've got to go. That's why they got to get cut off. So, I mean, what are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest capabilities? What's your best stuff? And ask yourself, are those things leading you into closer relationship with God? Do they drive you to depend and look to him? Or do they actually cause you to sort of create some distance and think, yeah, I don't really need God. I have this stuff, or I have this thing, and I really lean into it because I'm good at it. I would say more often than not, our stuff and our strengths, they hinder us more than they help us walk in close relationship with God. For me, I'm sort of crossing over here, but like your youthfulness, like that's a strength, right? It's like the world is ahead of you. I got this. Like, I got plans, I got visions, I got hopes and aspirations, and I got energy to do it. Is that leading you to depend on God, or are you sacrificing that joy of walking with him and depending on him because you've got some stuff that's like sort of useful? And here's the sad part, because there's more verses, right? You're like, okay, we went through enough of that. No, the thing is, it gets worse. It gets worse. Because their self-sufficiency was the seed that led to their self-destruction. Because the next 3 verses, these are not good things that became bad things. These are bad things that they started to call good things, right? So there's a definite progression. As soon as we decide we don't really need God and we kind of got it, the next step in the human heart is to actually be against God. Once we think we kind of got it, we're like, I don't really need him. And so we start by doing things without God, and pretty soon we're doing things against God. That's what happens in the nation of Israel over and over again, and it continues to happen to us today if we lose sight of the fact that we need him and that we're designed to live in relationship with him. So doing things without God leads us to doing things against God, because in verse 12, now he says, I will cut off sorceries from your hand, and you shall have no more tellers of fortunes. I will cut off your carved images and your pillars from among you, and you shall bow down no more to the work of your hands. I will root out your Asherah images from among you and destroy your cities. So that list of things, I don't think we appreciate how repulsive it is to God. Like that list of things, I mean, they're just things that Asherah images, pillars, I mean, what's the big deal? Carved images, I'm a woodworker, I like to work with wood. Like, no, those things are literally like strategic, like depictions of their rebellion against God. They're like strategic, because God is basically saying, trust me. Trust in what I promise you. Trust in what I tell you. And not only do they not do that, they don't just trust in maybe themselves or horses. They actually are going to people that exploit them, right, to say the same things. So they're like paying people who don't really know the future, who don't really have the power. They're actually then going to them and giving them things to tell them the things that God has already told them. It is repulsive that the people of God would do this to God. But we start by thinking we can do it without him, and pretty soon we're just doing stuff against him because we don't need him. We've lost our need for him. Once you start substituting things for God in your life, pretty soon there's nothing you won't substitute for him. Like, that's true. Like, the further away you get from your need and your dependence upon him, the more honestly out of control you get, and the more enslaved you get to whatever your sin nature thinks it wants or desires. It's sad. These are the people of God. The people of God are consulting fortune tellers and sorcerers, and they're carving little images and being like, okay, this one's going to help us do this. Oh, isn't he so awesome? Let's worship him. So, like, the people of God, the people who have the word and the promises and the history of who God is in their lives are doing these things. How do we get there? We started substituting. We started thinking we didn't need God. And look where it has gotten us. See, the people of Israel, over and over again, what do they want? They want God to come save them. They want God to come rescue them. They want God, and what they mean is, get rid of that guy over there. You know, those people, we don't like those people. Could you get rid of them so that we could, have our land back and have our stuff back and go on our merry way? That's what they want, and guess what? Jesus is going to do that. He's going to do that. Actually, a lot of what is said here in the first, little bit here, Jesus came once, he's coming back again. Like, he is going to rule, and he is going to squash out all evil rulers, and he is going to reign over his people. Like, that's coming still. But God is so good that he saves these people from this. I mean, seriously, if any one of us was in God's place, I'd just be like, chunk them, like 100 times over. But God is so good, and he is so determined to rescue his people that even when they do things that hurt the relationship that he's created to have with them, he's got a plan for it. And he's coming, and he's going to save them from themselves. Not just from enemies out there, but from the enemy right in here. That's the good news for us today, is that Jesus conquers your worst enemy, yourself. Jesus conquers your worst enemy, and that is yourself. It's your own tendency to turn from God to yourself. And then all the things that ensue after that. Jesus is strong enough and good enough to save you from yourself. He's good enough to save you from your horses and your chariots and your cities and your strongholds and your long list of sins and all the stuff that you've done to hurt your relationship with God, all the ways that you've turned your back on him, all the ways that you've insulted him by the way that you've lived in independence without him. Jesus is going to save you from that. And that's good news. That's a message that we need to hear, right? Micah is warning us, all the things that you accumulate to make you stronger, all the stuff that you're trusting in to make you safer, all of the things that you are bolstering yourself up around you to make you feel confident, that replace God, he's coming for them. Why? Because they don't amount to anything. Because they take away the one thing that we were created for, which is to live and walk in relationship with our God. What are the in-here enemies in your life that you need to deal with? Easy to come to church and be like, I want to hear a message. It's a great encouraging message, something I can just really grab onto and leave and be so encouraged by. God loves you too much to leave you in your sin. He loves you too much to let you just skip out of here in your defiant independence and live your life without him. Like, that's the whole thing, is so that we can be with God and we can live in the relationship he has for us. It's so amazing that he offers that kind of salvation to us. What is the stuff in your life that you're depending on that is replacing your dependence on God? Micah's message to us this morning, I think, is Get rid of your confidence in anything that pulls you away from depending on God. Get rid of your confidence in anything that pulls you away from depending on God. What area of your life are you doing without God? There is literally no area of your life that God does not, that he wants you to do without him. He wants you to do life with him. He doesn't want you to figure out your finances without him. He doesn't want you to be a great dad or a great mom without him. He doesn't want you to save your marriage or be a stellar husband without him. He doesn't want you to figure out how to have some measure of joy or fulfillment in life without him. You were designed to need God. You're designed to need God. Let him do his part in your life. Don't do any part of life without God. And I just want to suggest, I think, 3 meaningful questions to ask yourself as you seek to kind of respond and take in the message here from Micah chapter 5. The first is, what things do I need to get rid of confidence in my life? What things am I overly confident in that are hurting my dependence on God? They're causing me not to look to him, but to look to these things or myself. Could be your abilities. You're really good at something. Might be your brains. You might be a really smart person. Usually I can figure it out. I got it. Could be your money. You know, like I said earlier, our strengths, man, they're going to be the things that hinder us from walking in close relationship with God because we think we got it. We think it's all okay. I don't need God. We always need God. God wants to do things with us. He wants us to go to him in our parenting and in our marriages and in our jobs and in our pursuits in life. There's some things we probably need to get rid of confidence in. I don't want to touch this one, but I'm going to touch on it. But I think one thing, especially as we move forward, Jesus is our King. Okay? Our confidence is not in our country or in our leaders. Confidence is in Jesus. We have an opportunity to demonstrate that confidence. It doesn't mean we're not involved. It doesn't mean that we don't engage in discussions. But far too often, not convinced that we're confident is in when Jesus rules and reigns. I think sometimes our confidence we can really think it's going to be somebody else. It's not going to be anybody else. It's going to be Jesus. That's our primary concern as the people of God. And honestly, it's relevant to this text because it's what the nation of Israel was putting their confidence in. Militaries, armies, rulers. And he'd already promised them that I'm coming. Wait for me. Trust in me. Look to me. Second question is, what things do I just need to get rid of in my life? Right? The second half of these things that he's going to come cut away, they're things that never had a place within the community of the people of God. Right? The carved images, the fortune tellers, the sorcerers, like those things were never good. There's no version of those that's good. Yet here they are, the people of God, practicing them, living them out among themselves. What things just need to go in your life? I'll say for me, like I said, I've been getting lit up all week by this, but like I got a lot of hobbies and desires and stuff, like, which again are not maybe bad in and of themselves, but it's like, man, we're always so busy. We always got no time. Like, well, man, in the wintertime, I kind of like to duck hunt like every day if I could. I'm kind of busy, you know, for like things that God's calling me to. Some things got to go. Some things don't belong. They're patterns of sin in your life. just you just aren't able to let go of, or haven't been able to let go of, or aren't really trying to let go of? I mean, how can you walk with God and depend on him if you're unwilling to get rid of some stuff that obviously is hurting your relationship with him? And the third question would be, think through, what are some things that I can do to demonstrate my dependence on God? Just, what can you do to demonstrate, God, I'm looking to you. God, I need you. What can you tangibly do to demonstrate that you need him? And I'll say, I'm going to try not to use like overly churchy stuff, but like be in the Bible, okay? Just whatever that looks like. Like if you really are going to depend on God, like be in the Bible. Like how can you be depending on God and not like hearing what he says in his word regularly? And here's the thing, you guys, like there's never been a time where there's more ways to do that, right? There's never been a time in the history of humanity where there's all of these, like you can have it on audio, like there's podcasts, there's all these ways that you can like get the Bible into your life. And I'll be the first to say, like I struggle with this, like the idea that I need to like get up and read a portion of scripture like that is a constant battle in my life. But I will say this, I need to be in the Bible. I need God. I need him to speak to me. And I will say, like, one of the things about preaching or teaching that's always so incredible is just being forced to look longer at something. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, if I would have read this passage in my daily Bible reading, I think it would have went pink right off. But you sit here and you study this and you realize what God's saying. It is incredible. I'm like, I need it. I need him to cut some stuff out of my life. And unless I really let him do that, like I'll just do what they did. So you got to be in the Bible some way, somehow. Get God's word in your head and in your heart. Talk to God. Okay? I won't use the P word, but how about you pray, right? Talk to God. Like, do you talk to God? Like, that's a very convicting thing to me sometimes. I'm like, have I talked to God today? Because I'll like get up, and again, I'm a busy person. I'll get up and I'll go outside to take the trash out. And if I don't have to be anywhere, like 3 hours later, I'll come in and I'll walk by my wife, and she'll be like, huh. And it's like a joke now. She's like, oh, did you take the garbage out? Because I went to take the garbage out, and then I saw there was a weed over there, and a weed over there, and a tree over there, and pretty soon it's like, I'm just go. And my whole day can be that way. It's like, am I talking to God? Like when I run into a problem at work, am I just like, okay, when I'm getting frustrated at work, what I want to do is like go in and rant to, other managers or whatever. But it's like, when I'm struggling, do I just talk to God? Like, because if I'm depending on him, I kind of think I probably will be talking to him. Seems like that might be part of it, right? So be in the Bible. Talk to God throughout your day. Talk to him. I'll say one of the most profound ways that God meets me in my struggles is seriously when I just say, God, help. I need help. I'm a mess. Like, I'm in a bad spot. I'm angry and upset, and everything sets me off. Like, and then pretty soon, everything in my wife, whatever she's doing is bugging me. I got 4 kids. They all take turns bugging me. And I'm just like, sometimes I'll go out in my shop, and I'm just like, God, I need help. Like, I need, like, you. Like I can't do this. I can't be happy. I can't be a good dad. Like, I can see that I'm being destructive. Like, I can see that I'm being who I ultimately don't want to be, but I honestly can't. Like, and that prayer right there, I think it's what God wants. He doesn't want you to be great without him. He's not asking you to be an awesome husband without him. Like, I don't know how we don't get this, but we don't get this. And I know it, but I still don't get it, right? We were designed to need God. He has promised so much to you in his word. Man, depend on him. Lean into him. Need him. And see how he shows up in your life. So let's make sure we get rid of the stuff that we need to get rid of. The stuff that we're putting confidence in that is taking away the joy of living in dependence on God.